Here's the uncomfortable truth. The mystery isn't clever. Port Charles is just arresting people until something sticks. Jack Brennan as Anna's kidnapper is the obvious guess. So obvious, it practically comes with a neon sign and a police escort. Naturally, that means the investigation has turned into its usual carnival of misfires, with law enforcement charging in confidently, arresting the wrong person, and congratulating itself for the effort. Curtis is the culprit? Please. This is shaping up less like a coherent case and more like Murder on the Orient Express, except instead of each suspect taking a turn stabbing the victim, each suspect will take a turn getting arrested for the same shooting. The only real twist left is the order. The smarter suspicion points elsewhere. Nathan. The motive is almost insultingly tidy. Anna stood in the way of his return to the PCPD, and he needed proximity to the investigation to stay a step ahead. The unsettling implication is that Nathan is running the operation, not Sidwell. Sidwell, in this version, is merely the convenient monster of the week, useful for intimidation, and even more useful as cover. The framing of Sonny and Laura reads less like random chaos and more like deliberate orchestration. If Sidwell is blackmailing anyone, it looks like it's in service of keeping Nathan's identity buried, not because Sidwell is the mastermind. And when Maxie returns in 26, the expectation is immediate recognition that the narrative is lying about Nathan, because someone in town still remembers how faces work. Meanwhile, the show continues its favorite hobby, floating increasingly implausible suspects like party balloons. Willow as a contender still gets airtime because nothing says credible mystery like tossing in a name and waiting to see if it sticks. The idea of Willow shooting Drew, however, would at least deliver one rare gift, an ending that feels satisfying instead of merely concluded. At this point, wrapping the Who Shot Drew storyline isn't just welcome, it's overdue. And no, the case is not resolved. Selena Wu is not responsible. Curtis never paid her, and she does not operate a charity service for other people's messes. That leaves the central fact intact. The shooter remains unknown, despite all the confident declarations and dramatic pacing. Elsewhere, Valentine's movements are treated like a thriller, because nothing sells suspense like someone sneaking up behind a character in a scene designed to be mysterious. Valentine heading toward Anna feels practically confirmed, and Anna being back is a relief. Though the surrounding chaos makes it difficult to enjoy her return without bracing for the next contrived complication. Also, Brennan's actor being on contract signals exactly what it always signals. The story will get dicey, which is a polite way of saying prolonged. Character fatigue is also doing its usual heavy lifting. Dante's presence has become so grating, it inspires the simple wish for silence, a full month without his voice as a public service. Lucas, on the other hand, is still performing the holier-than-thou routine with such devotion that the inevitable regret is practically scheduled. Ignoring Carly's warning is framed as a coming mistake, not a moral stand. Romance speculation continues because it must. Carly and Valentine as a couple land squarely in the yes or no category, which is fitting because there appears to be no middle ground. Either it works as a deliciously volatile pairing, or it becomes another exercise in forcing chemistry through sheer persistence. Plot whiplash remains a proud tradition. Sonny is poised to turn the tables on Sidwell, while Chase is headed for the kind of discovery writers love. Dalton's body at Windermere, because no one ever finds anything normal in that place. And then there's Drew, once positioned as a nice guy, now rewritten as a major villain without the courtesy of a coherent reason. A transformation like that demands a believable catalyst. Instead, it arrives like a memo the audience was never allowed to read. Even continuity gets its moment of confusion. Was the episode a rerun? And why does Ned appear casually alive and sipping hot cocoa with Brooke Lynn after apparently being dead? It's either a misunderstanding or another reminder that clarity is not a priority when melodrama is available. Finally, just when the story can't possibly add more noise, it throws in the inevitable pearl clutching. The suggestion that someone in the White House will be very upset about two boys kissing, because nothing says grounded storytelling like imagining federal outrage as a subplot accessory. In summary, the mystery is bloated, the arrests are likely to keep rotating, the villainy has been rewritten without justification, and the only consistent theme is that everyone is guilty until the plot decides otherwise. That Drew shooting storyline isn't suspenseful, it's a hostage situation with commercials. Carly should, in theory, be useful for once and get Valentine something to eat. The fact that this even feels like a tall order says everything about the current state of things. What's being demanded here is not complicated, just profoundly overdue. Two events need to happen by 2026 or sooner. First, Drew Kane needs to exit in a properly tragic manner, preferably with the kind of narrative finality that prevents his immediate return via a sudden, miracle recovery and a perfectly timed haircut. Second, Portia's cheating fallout needs to be catastrophic. Not awkward conversations in tasteful lighting, catastrophic, epic. The kind of collapse that forces both Portia and Trina into the rarest of soap opera experiences, consequences, followed by humbling. Meanwhile, the Drew and Willow situation continues to unfold like a storyline assembled during a power outage. The hope was simple: no marriage. Because no, they do not belong together. And if immoral standards are still being pretended at all, the comparison game practically writes itself. What's worse, Carly sleeping with Jason and AJ, or Willow sleeping with Michael and Drew? Of course, that debate immediately trips over its own history, because Carly also slept with Drew, Jason, and AJ, who are all brothers. At that point, it stops being scandal and starts resembling a family tradition. Elsewhere, the show remembers to do one thing correctly. Brooke Lynn looks stunning, the hair is impeccable, and the performance is solid. A rare island of competence in an ocean of chaos. Then comes the Drew shooting investigation, which is being dragged out with the determination of a storyline that refuses to die even when the audience begs it to. Another arrest has been made, because nothing says tight plotting, like stacking suspects, until the board looks busy. The speculation, at least, is refreshingly analytical. The shooter appears inexperienced, has hair, and is connected to Scout, thanks to a ringtone. That points to someone with access, size, motive, and limited shooting ability. Danny gets the accusation: access to weapons, the kind of impulsivity that screams poor decision-making, and a plausible connection if Scout called him when she ran away from camp. It's a theory built less on drama and more on the depressing logic of reckless teenagers and unsecured firearms. The tone around all this is, understandably, a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. What in the Wuthering Heights is all this? Is not a question so much as a diagnosis. Endes. Pascal being jealous would be entirely on brand, because nothing in this universe stays calm when ego is available. The Laura and Sonny dilemma adds another layer of questionable counsel. Kevin's suggestion that Laura should turn herself in without implicating Sonny is treated like what it is: baffling. It's not principled. It's strategically incoherent, an invitation to martyrdom with none of the payoff. Which is impressive, considering how often this show confuses sacrifice with intelligence. Then, as if the villain roster needed refreshing, Brennan is now positioned as the bad guy. Naturally. Because the fastest way to keep the audience disoriented is to rotate moral alignments like seasonal decor. The reaction, near choking on water, feels appropriate. When the narrative choices inspire involuntary physical responses, that's not engaging television. That's a warning sign. On the brighter side, there's an unexpected development worth preserving: peace between Sonny and Rick. Cordiality is rare in this town, and it should last, though optimism here feels like placing fragile glassware on a moving treadmill. Dante, however, has apparently undergone a transformation into an insufferable jarhead. The question isn't when it happened. The question is why the show keeps insisting that this is character development rather than character erosion. Sidwell's blackmail attempt at Sonny's house is the kind of arrogance that deserves an educational consequence. Walking into Sonny's domain to threaten him isn't bold, it's naive. Sonny and Jason are cold, calculating, and not remotely sentimental about removing obstacles. Sidwell is being framed as pompous and convinced of his own superiority, which usually means he's about to discover, in humiliating fashion, that the smartest person in the room doesn't announce it. Lulu's current portrayal is another casualty. A character once defined by ferocity is now reduced to a trembling, so scared routine that doesn't fit and doesn't land. Laura mirroring that fear only compounds the problem. It's not vulnerability, it's a rewrite that strips them of their spine. Not all heavy storylines are being dismissed, though. The metallosis plotline, while easy for some to label absurd, hits with real-world accuracy. It reflects a medical reality where pain complaints get brushed off, critical information is withheld, and the long-term damage becomes irreversible. Years of confusion, repeated surgeries, systemic poisoning, bone deterioration. This is not melodrama. It's tragedy rooted in negligence. The writers handled something real, and it mattered. The show's legacy threads still surface too. The reminder that Liz and Jason were engaged, around 2008, floats by like a whisper from a version of the series that still understood restraint. And then there's the most honest critique of all, stepping away since November 25th in the hope that the "Who Shot Drew" slog would end, and that Dante might vanish from the screen, only to find neither has occurred. After decades of loyalty, dating back to 1963, there is only so much patience left for storylines that refuse resolution. At this point, fast-forwarding becomes a survival tactic. Even the basic mechanics of viewing aren't spared. When a Friday episode is expected and the screen delivers Tim Arhal instead, it's hard to tell whether the problem is scheduling, recording, or the universe intervening for mercy. Finally, there's the pairing no one asked for and yet somehow works. Valentine and Carly. Not necessarily romantic, just a link-up with energy, chemistry, and the kind of unexpected satisfaction the show rarely delivers on purpose. Sometimes the best dynamics are the ones that simply happen while the bigger storylines are busy sabotaging themselves. Sidwell isn't a mastermind. He's a public safety hazard with a villain speech, and somehow he still thinks he can blackmail Sonny in his own house. Lucas continues to drift through this storyline with the wide-eyed sincerity of someone who still believes villains announce themselves with a business card and a theme song. The naivety is almost impressive until it becomes inconvenient, which is roughly every time he opens his mouth. And given the general atmosphere of Dalton's labs, it is difficult to ignore the lingering suspicion that the dogs being held narrative may be nothing more than a carefully placed distraction. Because nothing says ethical research facility like the possibility of a secret chamber somewhere in the back where humans are being treated like optional lab equipment. Meanwhile, the fantasy that Cyrus and Esme are alive belongs exactly where it started, in a dream sequence. This is Port Charles, not a fairy tale, and even the dead have better timing than that. If anyone is about to vanish next, Sidwell looks like the kind of man who should start practicing being missing. The only mystery left is whether it happens quietly or with the theatrical flourish he so clearly believes he deserves. Curtis, of course, has apparently decided subtlety is for civilians. The revelation that he placed a $1 million hit on Drew through Selena Wu is the sort of moral shortcut that turns a complicated character into a walking cautionary tale. It also raises the obvious question. If Selena claimed to have the perfect person for the job, does that perfect person happen to be Brad? Conveniently indebted to her for having his gambling debts paid off, and suspiciously shaped like the shadow seen in the aftermath? The setup is tidy, the motive is clean, and the irony is exquisite. Curtis might not have pulled the trigger, but he certainly paid for the bullets. As for the Drew shooting itself, the idea that Curtis was somehow guilty for it lands exactly where it should, with the rest of the town's misplaced certainty and selective memory. The real issue is not whether Curtis is capable of ruinous choices. Clearly, he is. The issue is how many people are willing to pretend shock every time he makes one. Then there is Anna's disappearance, which has all the hallmarks of a plot designed to keep competent adults off screen until it becomes dramatically convenient. The questions write themselves. Who orchestrated it? Who benefits? And how far are they willing to go to keep her from returning to Port Charles? The joke, naturally, is that she is returning this week anyway. Nothing screams powerful conspiracy like being immediately undone by the calendar. And yes, the suspicious flat tire incident has fingerprints all over it. The call Nathan received when Laura's car caught a suspicious flat points straight to Sidwell, with Nathan taking photos like the universe itself is begging someone to connect the dots. This is not investigative brilliance. It is the narrative shouting the answer, and hoping someone in town is awake enough to hear it. Carly's situation, predictably, is less strategy and more improvisational chaos with consequences. The question is not what will be told to Jack when he arrives and finds Valentine at the house. The question is why this continues to be treated like an unforeseeable complication, rather than the inevitable result of a lifestyle built entirely on poor timing and worse transparency. The Nina versus Carly comparison also deserves a moment of clarity. Declaring Nina stronger, as if Carly has not marched into the teeth of organized crime, up against the five families and Cyrus no less, wearing a white dress and wielding a baseball bat, is a fascinating revision of history. It is not a debate, it is denial with better lighting. The show did manage to offer a few actual rewards. Michael and Jacinda finally crossing into unmistakable chemistry qualifies as one of the rare developments that feels earned rather than forced. Their closer trajectory has been a long time coming, and watching it unfold lands as one of the few beats that does not require mental gymnastics to accept. Trina, however, is rapidly becoming the embodiment of entitlement dressed as righteousness. The attitude toward Jordan would be grating enough, but escalating to confronting Nathan and insisting he cannot take her father is a performance of audacity that suggests a deep misunderstanding of how law enforcement works. Controlling a parent is not a legal strategy, and the meltdown over not being informed about a pregnancy, particularly one that is obviously anything but normal, ignores an inconvenient truth. Portia has the right to disclose personal information when she chooses, not when her daughter demands it. Trina used to feel grounded. Now she reads like someone who mistakes proximity for authority. Cyrus returning only adds gasoline to a town already operating on fumes and paranoia. The immediate demand is simple. If the villains insist on resurfacing, then the losses should stop being treated as permanent when the plot feels nostalgic. The desire for Sam back is less sentimentality and more a reasonable complaint about imbalance. And hovering over everything is Sidwell, still wandering into rooms he should not survive entering, especially Sonny'S. Sidwell stepping into Sonny's house and attempting blackmail is not boldness. It is a lack of survival instincts packaged as confidence. He behaves like the CEO of Bad Decisions Incorporated, strolling into danger with the smug certainty of a man who has never had consequences introduced to him properly. The concept of Sidwell trying to intimidate Sonny Corinthos is comedic on its face. The idea of him thinking Jason could be rattled is even better. Jason's expression has not shifted since 1999. Intimidation bounces off him the way light bounces off a mirror, without leaving a mark. Sidwell keeps strutting like a bargain bin mastermind auditioning for Villain Eliminated in Episode 3, talking big while collecting losses with the consistency of a man committed to failing publicly. He tries to disrespect everyone in the room, and the responses say everything. Laura's look communicates that he must be new. Sonny's look communicates a question about kneecaps. Jason's silence communicates that the metaphorical grave has already been dug and is simply waiting for scheduling. At this point, Sidwell is less an antagonist and more a warning label, a walking example of what happens when arrogance replaces judgment. The downfall is clearly approaching. Sonny and Jason are not even rushing it. They are simply letting him monologue long enough for the audience to enjoy the inevitable collapse. The biggest villain in Port Charles isn't Sidwell, it's the writing room. Port Charles has always had villains, betrayals, and the occasional moral collapse disguised as romance. What it does not need is this current parade of incoherent plotting, character vandalism, and science fiction nonsense being treated as if it belongs in the same universe as ELQ shares and custody hearings. Sidwell is being positioned as the worst villain, which would be impressive if the writing allowed him to be meaningfully threatening instead of bizarrely convenient. The storyline has drifted into full fantasy, regeneration, repaired body parts, even the casual restoration of a missing hand. At this point, proof no longer exists in Port Charles, only whatever the script decides to resurrect this week. The insistence on using Ryan's missing hand as an argument in identity speculation is adorable, considering the show has essentially introduced a villain who can run a supernatural repair shop out of thin air. If Sidwell can rebuild people like spare parts, then logic has officially been euthanized. Meanwhile, the alleged suspense surrounding who shot Drew lands with all the impact of a missed cue. The blunt truth is that the mystery lacks weight, because Drew himself has been written into irrelevance. The show keeps asking viewers to care, while simultaneously offering no reason to do so. Theories proliferate anyway. Ms. Wu did it, Curtis arranged it, Scout did it. Because when the writing refuses to provide coherence, speculation becomes a hobby of necessity. Yet even that feels like effort the story hasn't earned. The Drew problem goes deeper than a whodunit. The current version is unrecognizable, an entirely different man wearing the name. This is not a complex evolution. It is a rewrite without justification. And for all the noise around Sidwell, the strangest part is that no one seems meaningfully compelled to respond. Even Sonny, who should be the natural counterweight, is left hovering in narrative limbo until the plot remembers he exists. Then there is Willow, the show's ongoing masterclass in self-inflicted disaster, presented as if it deserves sympathy by default. Cheating with a spouse's uncle is not a complicated romance. It is a deliberate act with predictable consequences. The pattern is consistent, one relationship after another, loyalty treated as optional, accountability treated as persecution. The custody fight is especially rich because the choices that sparked it are not subtle. Refusing joint custody as unreasonable, prioritizing a lover's influence over direct communication, leaving the state without the father's permission, and signing paperwork that effectively hands parental rights to Drew if anything happens. None of that screams stability. The idea that full custody should be granted purely on the basis of motherhood is not empowerment. It is entitlement with better lighting. Joint custody was the reasonable outcome before recklessness made court inevitable. The hypocrisy gets even sharper when judgment is aimed at Jacinda, a former call girl? So what? That is not the scandal here. The scandal is the selective morality, condemning one woman's past while excusing another woman's present, as if betrayal becomes virtuous when it comes wrapped in romantic music and slow-motion stares. If Willow is prostituting herself out to Drew, then any moral high ground over Jacinda evaporates instantly, and Portia and Trina are not exactly offering relief. The narrative keeps pushing them onto a pedestal. Deceptive, narcissistic, immature, and untrustworthy behavior framed as righteousness. Portia repeating history by sleeping with multiple men while playing paternity roulette is less dramatic and more, why are lessons never learned in this town? Even the small logical character beats are ignored. As chief of staff, arranging a proper Thanksgiving meal for those working at General Hospital, especially in the legacy of Monica, would have been the kind of grounded moment the show desperately needs. Instead, it chooses chaos, then wonders why it feels hollow. Speaking of hollow, characters vanish for months and return as if time is optional. Kevin strolls in with a breezy hello after a year-long absence with no explanation, as if the audience should politely pretend that makes sense. Ace is suddenly on the floor, another missing presence dropped into frame with no care for continuity. The writing does not simply forget characters. It treats viewers as if they will not notice. That is not mystery, it is negligence. And the broader character damage is everywhere. Dante's hostility toward his own son is a glaring example. It reads false because it is false to who he is supposed to be. Personalities are being bent into whatever shape the plot needs, and the result is a cast behaving like strangers who happen to share familiar names. A few stray threads linger. Laura trusting Kevin, despite suspicion that he may be working with Sidwell, Anna returning, and the inevitable scramble to explain her absence. The prediction that new Sam ends up with Jason, because in Port Charles, romantic and narrative reshuffling is apparently the only consistent tradition left. After decades of watching the show cycle through highs and lows, the problem is not that it is currently bad. The problem is that it is currently careless, nothing connects, motivations wobble, consequences are selective, characters disappear and reappear without continuity. The show keeps demanding emotional investment while refusing to do the basic work of earning it. Nobody should have to care who shot Drew. The writing should make them care. Until that happens, the only truly credible villain in Port Charles is the script itself. If Selena Wu ordered the hit, Drew wouldn't be alive to terrorize the cast. So who actually got their hands on the Quartermain gun? The question of whether Linda Pavey, Ryan's mother, has recently passed away should have a single, verifiable answer. Instead, the timeline appears to be scattered across conflicting dates, which is either a failure of basic clarity or an unfortunate reminder that even real-life news can be handled with the same precision as this show's plotting. And speaking of precision, the shooting storyline is determined to funnel suspicion toward Curtis, with Ms. Wu positioned as the convenient middleman and Drew framed as the helpless target. Except there is a slight problem, namely, logic. If Selena Wu truly arranged to have Drew shot, Drew would not be limping around being a menace. He would be dead. That is the point of hiring a professional. The Curtis did it through Wu theory collapses further. On one detail no one seems eager to explain: access to the Quartermain gun. Until someone can credibly answer how Curtis, Ms. Wu, or anyone else got their hands on it, the accusation is not intrigue, it is noise. The Quartermains, meanwhile, continue to operate as if family gatherings are optional for key relatives. Jason and Danny missing Quartermain Thanksgiving is not a subtle character beat. It is narrative negligence. This is the one institution in Port Charles that supposedly pulls everyone into its gravitational field, yet somehow the guest list keeps looking oddly incomplete. Then there's the show's persistent talent for manufacturing discomfort and calling it cute. Scout catching Willow's bouquet is not charming, it is wildly inappropriate. A child should not be dragged into ritualized adult romantic symbolism because the scene needs a sentimental button. It reads less like tradition and more like desperation. Casting and writing, however, deserve reluctant credit where it's due. The work being done with Rory and Chad is smart. Both actors are strong, but Rory pulls off the current material more effectively. It is a rare instance where the writing seems tailored to performance strengths, rather than forcing everyone through the same emotional template. Curtis remains stuck in a special kind of soap purgatory, constantly wronged, rarely restored. The obvious question, when does he get his money back, hangs in the air while Drew continues wreaking havoc with the swagger of a man who has never faced consequences in his life. If the show insists on keeping Curtis central, it might consider giving him what every other major legacy cluster enjoys: an actual family network. Sisters, brothers, aunts, more than a handful of relatives orbiting the same three conversations. Curtis has a company. The world around him should expand with it. Trina is a mixed bag. The newer, feistier edge is promising, but it needs refinement. She does have every right to keep her family in check, especially with her mother's pregnancy raising the emotional stakes. Her resentment toward Jordan is understandable, even if it becomes exhausting when it's the only note played. Portia keeping the pregnancy quiet makes sense in context. Secrecy is practically the town's civic tradition, but the show cannot keep wringing the same tension without offering growth on the other side of it. Stella is another case study in a character being written as strong when the behavior is simply intrusive. The take-charge archetype can be enjoyable when it's earned. It becomes grating when it turns into constant interference. Curtis is an adult, not a child who needs supervision. The frequent butting in does not read as love. It reads as control. Jordan, meanwhile, is skirting a different kind of mess. Hovering around a married man is not romantic complication. It is fundamentally inappropriate. It is difficult to root for anything when basic boundaries are treated like optional accessories. Marshall, at least, appears steadier. One of the few figures currently written with anything resembling clarity of mind. That small stability is notable precisely because the show is otherwise committed to chaos. Selena Wu's return is welcome in theory, but the writing immediately undercuts her credibility by trying to make her both omnipotent and strangely incompetent. Either she's dangerous or she's a red herring. The current version is neither. The Laura storyline is worse. It is the kind of logic-free staging that insults the audience. A normal person calls the police. Laura calls Sonny. Then she allows Sidwell into her home to blackmail her and does not eject him immediately or contact law enforcement. This is not suspense. It is artificial stupidity used to keep a plot alive. Even the smaller threads carry that same strain of contrivance. Telling Kevin about Dalton feels misguided, as if confidentiality and strategy are afterthoughts. Dante staying glued to the Geo case reads less like dedication and more like the show refusing to assign accountability where it belongs, because Emma stirring the pot and walking away clean is apparently the preferred moral structure now. If anyone is due consequences, it is not Geo alone. Amid all this, the desire for a little happiness is practically a public service announcement. Pair Molly and Cody, let someone be content for more than 5 minutes, and stop treating joy like an endangered species. As for Britt, the suspicion that she was manipulated, possibly tricked into believing she has Huntington's, possibly pushed into dependency through another substance supplied by Sidwell, at least sounds like the kind of calculated villainy the show claims to write. If that is the direction, it would be one of the few plots that actually aligns motive, method, and result. And of course, the eternal constants remain. Carly and Jason still sit firmly at the top of the loyalty list, while the audience is left asking the same questions week after week. Who was at Laura's door? Who had the gun? And why does everyone behave like the police department is a myth told to children? Stop calling it a slow burn. This is just the show refusing to finish a storyline. General Hospital appears to be flirting with the idea of progress and then immediately changing the subject, an approach that has become almost performance art at this point. Several storylines and character choices are dangling in midair, not because suspense is being built, but because the narrative seems allergic to follow-through. The Molly and Cody arc is a prime example. Momentum finally suggested something might happen, and then, predictably, another diversion. Cody, a character worth rooting for, keeps getting positioned for happiness and then steered away from it. And for the record, the insistence that Britt is the solution to that problem remains a baffling creative impulse, like solving a headache by introducing a second headache. Then there is Dante, who has been engineered into a prolonged exercise in irritation. The show keeps expecting viewers to accept his behavior as grief or loss and move on. Redemption requires intention, not just a future scene where he suddenly becomes reasonable again because the script remembers he used to be. Lucas is enduring a different kind of character sabotage, the kind where the writing doesn't merely shift a personality, it replaces it. The earlier version of Lucas had stability and backbone. This one has been reduced to a strangely whiny presence, as if the goal is to make the audience forget why the character mattered in the first place. Meanwhile, Emma and Geo are behaving like immature teenagers in the most unconvincing way possible, less youthful energy and more manufactured foolishness. The result is not charming, it is ridiculous, and not in the fun soap way. Trina remains a bright spot. Strong character, talented young actress, consistently capable of carrying emotional weight, which makes the wardrobe choices all the more puzzling. A poorly fitted top in an unforgiving pink-peach color range does not read as styling. It reads as sabotage. When the clothing becomes a distraction strong enough to provoke shouting at the screen, something has gone wrong in the chain of decision-making. And while distractions abound, there are storylines that desperately need a conclusion, starting with who shot Drew. Whatever intrigue existed has been stretched past effectiveness into monotony. The longer it drags on, the less it feels like a mystery, and the more it feels like a refusal to commit. The show's relationship with death has also become casually absurd. Characters reappearing after being gone is a soap tradition, yes, but at a certain point, it stops being dramatic and starts being the Twilight Zone with better lighting. Sidwell, in particular, has swallowed the canvas so thoroughly that it barely resembles General Hospital anymore. Laura's recent material highlights another persistent issue: characters behaving irrationally simply to keep a plot alive. A woman supposedly trying not to alert an unknown visitor somehow approaches the door with maximum noise, then presses both palms against it while peering through the peephole like a public announcement. The same pattern continues with the blackmail photo. Destroying it would at least demonstrate resistance. Even if copies exist, the gesture matters, because allowing someone to posture unchecked is how bullies become plot devices. The logic gaps keep widening. Laura discussing turning herself in for what exactly? A claim that her DNA is on the gun, courtesy of Sidwell, who is not exactly a credible steward of forensic integrity. Valentine suddenly targeting Carly, as if that choice is self-explanatory. These are not mysteries that invite engagement. They are confusions that demand translation. Still, when the show allows Laura to be Laura, it works. Her defiance, reminding Sidwell she has faced bigger threats and survived, lands because it's grounded in who she is. And the idea that Sonny will be blackmailed by Sidwell is almost adorable in its optimism. That man has endured wars, betrayals, and family implosions. He is not going to fold because someone waves a photo like it's a nuclear code. There are also ripple effects worth watching: Sidwell dismissing Selena and her inevitable return, which at least hints at movement in the larger ecosystem. The hope that Brad won't be far behind suggests an appetite for the show to restore its bench of complicated players, rather than endlessly circling the same few chess pieces. And if Britt was a witness, Sidwell eliminating Dalton fits the villain template. At least that part understands cause and effect. Finally, the outrage over Cyrus and Esme is revealing, not because it's unreasonable to be wary of resurrection fatigue, but because the reaction far outweighs the material. 2 brief scenes, less than 5 minutes, a handful of lines, and the panic button gets slammed. If it takes longer to complain than it does to watch the appearance, the issue may not be the show's choices so much as the audience's compulsion to treat every moment like a referendum. Esme appearing in a nightmare is not a character coming back from the dead. It is a nightmare doing what nightmares do, conjuring fear in familiar faces. And as villains go, Esme has always been effective. So were the Cassadines, operators with style, menace, and legacy. When the show remembers how to deploy villainy with purpose rather than chaos, it actually feels like itself again. The silent partner twist isn't clever. It's a recycling program with better lighting. After years of loyal viewing, the enthusiasm is unmistakable. General Hospital remains a reliable source of entertainment, a long-running comfort watch that somehow still inspires the kind of collective investment usually reserved for actual civic matters. It is, apparently, not enough for Port Charles to generate drama on television. It must also fuel ongoing conversation elsewhere, because nothing says community like passionately debating fictional chaos as if it affects property values. And speaking of chaos, the mystery of C has been floated with the subtlety of a brick through a window. The silent partner is not merely a plot device. It is an invitation for the show to do what it does best: introduce a shadowy figure with a dramatic initial and pretend this is new. The speculation lands where it always does: a secret relative, specifically Claudia Zaccarat's twin sister, because soap operas treat twins the way hospitals treat bandages: always available, always convenient, and somehow always the solution. Naturally, the proposed remedy is a classic: bring back Sarah Brown. Not as a sentimental cameo, but as a calculated disruption, an opponent worthy of Sonny, the perpetual gravitational center of Port Charles. Better yet, position her as an ex-wife to Sidwell, because nothing strengthens a villain's relevance like retroactive marital baggage. If Sidwell is going to exist, he might as well arrive with paperwork and unresolved resentment. Not all returning character fantasies are so elegantly strategic, though. The call to bring back Jasper Jacks reads like a plea for a certain brand of charming interference, someone who can walk into a scene, smirk at the chaos, and make it worse while insisting he's improving it. Port Charles has never lacked for trouble. It merely rotates who gets to deliver it with a tailored jacket and impeccable timing. Meanwhile, Ezra continues to inspire the rarest of soap opera achievements: universal fatigue. The idea of Ezra becoming mayor of Port Charles is treated not as a dramatic twist, but as an administrative nightmare the audience is being asked to endure. There are villains, there are antagonists, and then there are characters who feel like a stubborn stain on a clean narrative. Ezra appears to be aiming for that final category. The forward-looking predictions are, at least, grimly coherent. Marco is expected to be cornered into eliminating Sidwell, not out of ambition, but necessity, specifically to save Lucas during a future confrontation. It is the standard soap equation: loyalty plus danger equals morally convenient violence, packaged as reluctant heroism. And then there is Jocelyn, who, in classic fashion, is portrayed as dangerously committed to the wrong pressure point. Continuing to push Jack is framed as the kind of decision that produces consequences, messy ones. The warning is clear: Vaughn is not the real threat. He is merely background noise compared to what Jocelyn is actively provoking. Port Charles rarely punishes people for being cautious. It punishes them for being confident. So what's next in Port Charles? The answer is predictable, which is part of the appeal: secrets with initials, resurrected rivals, returning disruptors, political mistakes nobody asked for, and interpersonal escalation disguised as bravery. The town will continue to combust, elegantly, repeatedly, and with just enough familiarity to make the audience grateful it's happening to someone else. General Hospital spoilers and updates indicate that the pivotal witness, Britt Westbourne, has the potential to rescue both Sonny Corinthos and Laura Collins. The pressing question remains: will Britt step in to assist with the downfall of Jen's Sidwell when the moment is right? Currently, Sidwell is exerting pressure on both Laura and Sonny through blackmail, armed with damning photographs and the murder weapon, which he claims is now tainted with Laura's DNA. While Sidwell may believe he has Sonny and Laura cornered, there might be a significant flaw in his strategy. This is largely due to the fact that Britt witnessed the entire incident and is fully aware that Sidwell was indeed the one who fired the gun. Furthermore, Britt has picked up on Sidwell's insinuations regarding Professor Henry Hank Dalton still being of potential value, suggesting that he was leaving breadcrumbs about the setup. Could Britt's first-hand account be the key to extricating Laura and Sonny from their predicament, and emerge as a crucial figure in the battle to put an end to this Sidwell ordeal? At some point, after Jason receives updates regarding the details of the blackmail, he might find himself confiding in Britt, leaving her utterly stunned. Britt could learn all about the latest drama surrounding Dalton and shock Jason with the revelation that she actually witnessed Sidwell committing the murder. It would be Britt's testimony against Sidwell's, but she could present a remarkably convincing argument to the authorities that would make sense to them. This becomes even more plausible if Britt ultimately decides to reveal the entire shady operation she has been involved in. On the other hand, there could be an alternative route to assisting Sonny and Laura if Britt has knowledge of where Sidwell hides his incriminating evidence. Britt might have the opportunity to pilfer the damning photographs and the murder weapon, allowing Jason to dispose of them for good. Regardless of how you look at it, Britt would be putting her life on the line if she confronts Sidwell, especially since her medication doses could potentially be cut off. Still, the narrative has positioned Britt as a witness to Dalton's gruesome end for a specific purpose. It is inevitable that Britt will become entangled in the chaotic situation involving Jason, Sonny, and Laura, so keep your eyes peeled. According to GH Spoilers, there is a possibility that Jason and Britt may grow closer as a result of this, so be sure not to miss the development of their deepening relationship. General Hospital spoilers and updates for the week of December 8th tease Alexis Davis receives a warning, and Justine Turner has a new plan. Plus, Anna Devane's revealed, but is something wrong? Acting Police Commissioner Dante Falconeri has a warning for Alexis, as news spreads of a prisoner escape. Valentine Cassadine parachuted out of the prisoner transport plane meant to bring him from Steinmauer to possibly Pentonville. Alexis sounds frustrated with a hint of resignation as she exclaims, "Oh God, what has Valentine done now?" A flash of a worried Lulu Spencer and a bloodied Valentine. With Carly Spencer comes across the screen. Carly looks worried, and Valentine looks like he landed in a cactus. Charlotte Cassadine's face flashes across the screen as Dante can be heard saying, "You can bet he's going to try and find Charlotte." Next, Acting District Attorney Justine Turner is briefing Dante and Detective Nathan West in her office about her new plan. Dante can again be heard saying, "Some new evidence has come to light, so who do you want to go after?" It appears that the case they are discussing here is the shooting of Drew Kane, as the faces of Willow Tate Corinthos and Curtis Ashford are shown. Viewers will recall from last week that Curtis had originally hired Selena Wu for a hit on Drew, and he wanted him dead that night, the night he was shot. He confessed this to Jordan Ashford, but then told her he thought better of it and called off the hit and stopped the wire transfer to Selena. But did he? Next, we see a man walking through some snow into a small building, and then we see Anna. But something seems wrong. Something seems off with Anna. She looks subdued, and like all the fight has gone out of her. It's definitely a different place than where we last saw her, or at least a different room. This might be Pascal walking into the building, which means Jen's Sidwell is in on the kidnapping as well. Normally, Anna wouldn't be this complacent, and she certainly wouldn't look like a zombie. Is she drugged, or is she brainwashed? She appears to be unbound. Why isn't she trying to escape? General Hospital spoilers reveal a preview clip has been released for Monday, December 8th, 2025. It shows Valentine Cassadine ambushing Carly Spencer. Marco Rios and Lucas Jones have a romantic dinner. Plus, Ned Quartermain and Brooklyn Quartermain have a bonding session. Keep reading, and let's talk about what is coming up in the ABC soap opera. Let's start off with BLQ and Ned, who sit together for an emotional talk. In the preview clip for Monday's episode, BLQ talks about her regrets as her father listens. The brunette could blame herself for all the friction between Dante Falconeri and Giovanni Gio Palmieri. BLQ might say that if she had told the truth about the pregnancy to begin with, then Gio and Dante might get along now. However, Ned will assure BLQ that nothing can be done about the past and to focus on the future. Over with Marco and Lucas, they share a romantic meal. However, the chat will eventually drift over to Carly. When Marco brings it up, Lucas will say that he refuses to pretend otherwise. Lucas is likely referring to Carly's true feelings about their relationship. Marco seems a bit taken aback from Lucas's statement. At Carly's place, she's stunned to see Valentine there, but also tells him to get out of her house immediately. She's pretty stern with her words. However, he has a pretty determined look on his face. Will Valentine tell Carly to help hide him, or her fake credentials and plot get exposed? Meanwhile, Jack Brennan and Jocelyn Jacks finally agree on something. Carly is in grave danger. General Hospital spoilers for the next episode reveal that the preview clip also shows Dante Falconeri warning Nathan West. The police commissioner declares that Valentine will go to any and every extreme to get to Charlotte Cassadine. Meanwhile, Charlotte takes off from her house when Lulu Spencer gets an alert. When Lulu realizes Valentine has escaped, she runs after Charlotte. However, we know by Tuesday, Charlotte is relieved, and then on Wednesday, Nathan makes an arrest. Whether it's Valentine who is arrested or not remains unclear. As for Alexis Davis, she gets a disturbing update. This could be about Valentine's escape, as they are family, and the two are close. What will Alexis's reaction be? Which storyline are you looking forward to seeing the most on Monday, December 8th, 2025? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Remember to keep watching the soap on ABC to find out what happens next. General Hospital spoilers and updates suggest that Nathan West might be on the verge of arresting Charlotte Cassadine. Could this be part of ADA Justine Turner's strategy to draw Valentine Cassadine out from his hiding place? With Valentine now at large, there will undoubtedly be an intensified effort to apprehend him and either return him to Steinmauer or possibly an even more dire location. At this point, Jack Brennan must be coming to the realization that transferring Valentine to the mainland was a grave mistake. This decision provided Valentine with the opportunity to escape his restraints and leap from the jet that was transporting him, prompting Nathan to update Dante Falconeri on the situation. Subsequently, Nathan and Dante will be informed of Ada Turner's plan, which may involve her insisting that they utilize Charlotte as bait. Ultimately, there is only one thing that could compel Valentine to surrender himself, and that is the love he has for his daughter, whom he cherishes more than anything else in the world. According to the latest GH spoilers, Nathan is set to make an arrest of a criminal, which raises the intriguing question: could this be a part of Ada Turner's strategic plan? It seems that Charlotte might face serious consequences for her involvement in the break-in at Professor Henry Hank Dalton's lab. That's potentially enough to persuade Valentine to turn himself in to the authorities. Ada Turner might be banking on the idea that if they create a significant public spectacle around Charlotte's arrest, Valentine will rush in and offer himself in exchange for her release. However, there's no certainty that this tactic will succeed, especially if Valentine sees through their intentions and realizes that the case could easily fall apart with Dalton no longer in the picture. Nevertheless, this is a gamble that Ada Turner might be willing to take. This storyline would ensure that Charlotte remains under close watch by law enforcement, effectively thwarting any plans Valentine might have for an abduction. The situation is bound to generate a lot of tension and frustration amidst the chaos of fugitives, prompting Turner to do everything within her power to bring the situation to a swift resolution. Meanwhile, Carly Spencer will find herself in a precarious position as she must conceal her partnership with Valentine from Brennan. Carly might feign remorse for suggesting the transfer and seek Brennan's reassurance that Valentine's escape wasn't her fault. General Hospital spoilers and updates indicate that Anna Devane is set to make her return as the next chapter of her captivity mystery unfolds. This hostage will undoubtedly require an escape plan, so let's delve into what lies ahead for Anna during the week of December 8 to 12. Fans of GH will remember that Anna was ambushed in her vehicle and rendered unconscious with chloroform by a black-gloved man in her back seat. Shortly thereafter, she found herself bound and trapped in an unknown location, where she could hear the unmistakable voice of Caesar Faison coming through a speaker. Although she was informed that she was being taken to a brand new life, the reality of her situation felt far from a new beginning. She woke up to terror hearing Faison's voice and confined to a small, dreary room with no apparent means of escape. However, Anna is not the type to simply resign herself to her circumstances. Viewers will observe Anna holding a pencil and notepad, possibly jotting down clues or theories as she brainstorms somehow. She's freed from her bonds and in a different room. Alternatively, there might be someone responsible for Anna's care, whom she can befriend and manipulate. At some point, Anna could write a message in hopes of getting it delivered back to her loved ones. Regardless of the situation, Anna will maintain her composure and work on uncovering the truth behind her circumstances. We will witness Anna reflecting on her situation and considering who might be orchestrating it, potentially bringing fans closer to unraveling the mystery as well. Since Faison's voice was heard shortly after Anna's abduction, she might recall Jason Morgan's suggestion about gaslighting and may suspect that someone is trying to convince her that Faison's alive. This could be done using AI to replicate his voice, or some other method. A few years back, Sam McCall used a voice replication program. However, Anna is wise enough not to completely dismiss the possibility of a Faison return. There will be much for Anna to ponder, but she will have ample time to do so as her forced captivity continues. She could benefit from an escape route or a rescuer. But she may find herself feeling frustrated and confined for a while longer, because they think she is engaged in a highly classified WSB mission. General Hospital spoilers and updates suggest that Sonny Corinthos' scheme to eliminate Jen Sidwell for good might place Lucas Jones and Jocelyn Jacks at risk. With Sidwell now possessing blackmail material to leverage against Sonny, he's treading on dangerous ground. Sonny is not the type to let a villain like Sidwell maintain the upper hand forever, and this time, he's backed into a corner, a position that he doesn't like. Given that Sonny is accustomed to being in control, he will undoubtedly strive to reclaim authority over the situation. This could involve orchestrating Sidwell's ultimate downfall. But as this conflict intensifies, both Lucas and Jocelyn may find themselves in peril. Since Lucas resides at Windermere, and Jocelyn is utilizing him for her WSB mission, they will be closely linked to any chaos that Sidwell might unleash. Although it can't be proven, many in Port Charles, close to the Corinthoses and Quartermains, believe Sidwell was responsible for 2 fires that put family members in danger. Just as fans witnessed during the assault on Sonny'S penthouse, there's a chance for unforeseen victims like Michael Corinthos to suffer harm. Christina Corinthos Davis also found herself caught in the blaze at Charlie's pub until Marco Rios came to her aid. It's common for innocent characters to become entangled in mob chaos on GH, so this could very well happen again. You can be sure Sonny will devise a plan to take revenge on Sidwell, which might involve following Jason Morgan's advice to eliminate him entirely. This could be the only way to put an end to Sidwell once and for all. Regrettably, there may be unforeseen repercussions if Lucas and Jocelyn find themselves caught in the crossfire, which could very easily happen. It's not hard to picture Lucas accidentally getting into perilous situations, while Jocelyn could also be put in grave danger as she attempts to rescue him. This scenario might result in Jack Brennan incurring Carly Spencer's anger for allowing Jocelyn to be harmed. Additionally, Carly could become enraged with Sonny and Jason for their lack of caution, taking out her frustrations and anger on them as well. The ongoing chaos involving Sidwell, Sonny, and Laura Collins could escalate into even more severe drama, so stay tuned for any troubling updates.